Since it's October and this is the month of Halloween, this month we're going to be exploring haunted places and ghost stories of New Mexico. So I'm going to start off by telling you guys about the St. James Hotel, which is in Cimarron, New Mexico. The St. James Hotel is haunted by the ghost of the Wild West. And this includes a poltergeist named T.J. Wright, but I'll tell you his story in a minute. So in 1842, there was a fur trapper named Lucien B. Maxwell, and he traveled to a ranch in northern New Mexico. While he ended up marrying one of the rancher's daughters, and then he inherited the ranch. So he decided to build a mansion here in 1858. This mansion would later become the St. James Hotel. So the town of Cimarron is in northern New Mexico, and it was originally a freight stop on the Santa Fe Trail. So with the Colfax County War starting, he sold his land to English investors for $1.75 million. Now I'll tell you guys the story of the Colfax County War on another video. So the Colfax County War basically was fought between the Hispanic people who lived on the land and the English investors who were buying the land and trying to kick them out. This war lasted from 1873 to 1888, and it was a bloody war. But like I said, I'll tell you guys this story on another video. The St. James Hotel witnessed at least 26 killings during and after the Colfax County War. It was a lawless time in the Wild West, and the St. James Hotel gained a very violent reputation. It was a popular hangout for the outlaws, the lawmen, and drunk fools. A lot of shit went down in this hotel. So much shit went down that when they removed the roof, they found over 400 bullet holes in the roof. So there was this guy named Henry Lambert. He was a cook for Abraham Lincoln, and he was appointed to be a cook by Ulysses S. Grant. While he came to Cimarron, New Mexico, and he bought the Maxwell Mansion. He turned it into a saloon, and he opened the saloon around 1872-1873. It was later turned into a hotel around 1880-1881. The St. James Hotel has hosted many of the famous names from the Wild West. Jesse James, Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, Buffalo Bill, Annie Oakley, Clay Allison, Billy the Kid, Pat Garrett, Blackjack Ketchum, Pat Masterson, and so many others. It was a wild hotel and many people died here, such as Mary Lambert, who was the owner's wife. She died in room number 17 and she still stays in that room. People who stay in this room say they could smell like a rose perfume, which was the perfume that she always wore. Whenever they open the window, I guess there's like a tapping that don't stop until you close the window, so I guess you don't like the window open, things like that. So she's not a poltergeist, she's a good spirit, it seems like. But in room number 18, T.J. Wright haunts that room, and it's so haunted that they had to lock it and close it off to the public because people were getting hurt who stayed there. So T.J. Wright was a card sharp and a gunslinger who was chilling at the St. James Hotel. He won the St. James Hotel in a card hand one night. I guess he must have played Henry Lambert. Henry Lambert must have put up the hotel. T.J. Wright won it, and that was that. So he won the hotel in a bet. He was all happy going to his hotel room, and when he was opening the door, boom, he got shot in the back and was killed. And for that reason, he was an angry spirit who haunts that room. He's hurt people, thrown things violently off the walls, all kinds of stuff has happened. I guess it was so bad they had to lock it to the public. Nobody can even enter that room. Ghost hunters come from around the world to investigate this hotel. Because all the death that this hotel had, it's a hot spot for paranormal activity. The second floor is the most haunted. They report feeling cold spots, they report smelling cigar smoke, and there's not even smoking allowed at this hotel. In the poker room, there's a poker table, and sometimes they could hear people playing poker, even though there's nobody playing poker. People who work there say you could always feel the spiritual presence, even if you can't see it. They hear voices, objects get thrown, windows open and shut, doors open and shut, things disappear and then reappear later. The electronic equipment behaves erratically, lights turn off and on. The manager heard someone scream loudly one night, like a loud scream, but nobody was there and nobody else heard it. And when the railroads came, that ended the Santa Fe Trail, which ended the Wild West days. The hotel fell into disrepair. Henry Lambert died in 1913. It was abandoned for a period of time. It passed through different owners' hands. Different people bought it, sold it, you know. Then in 1985, it was finally restored to its former glory. Today, the St. James Hotel is still open and it's a popular tourist destination. You could still rent a room and stay the night there. But beware, because it's very haunted with the ghosts of the Wild West. It's said that visiting the St. James Hotel is like going into a time machine and going to the Wild West days. So that's one of the most haunted places in New Mexico. The St. James Hotel in Cimarron, New Mexico. Make sure you check it out. Anyway, I hope you learned something new today. One of the most haunted places in New Mexico is also one of the most obvious. This is the New Mexico Penitentiary's old main facility. This prison is closed to the public, but they do guided tours, and they report a lot of paranormal activity. They say in the electric chamber that the lights always stay flashing on and off from all the energy that's still in there. They see ghosts, valves open and shut, things like that. Anyway, and the reason that this place is so haunted is because of the New Mexico prison riots of 1980. So on February 2nd and 3rd of 1980, the inmates beat up the COs, overpowered them, and took complete control of the penitentiary. They took 12 COs hostage, they went to the PC unit, and then they proceeded to kill PC inmates. 33 inmates were killed. They were going cell to cell and killing each inmate one by one. And they were slaughtering these guys. Some of them tried to barricade themselves in their cell, but that was no problem. These guys had the blowtorch, and they were just using it to cut through the bars and get at these fools. It was brutal. There's this story about them chopping off this one guy's head, kicking it around like a bowling ball, then putting it to the end of a broomstick and parading it around the prison. There's another story about this guy that was hung to the rim of the basketball court, and everybody passing by was just stabbing him, and it just looked like hanging flesh. There was this one guy that they brutally beat with the axe. The axe went through him and chipped the concrete. You can still see it to this day. There's another guy that they burned, and where they burned him on the concrete, you can see the burn mark. They try to cover it up, but it always resurfaces no matter what. So after 36 hours of slaughter, the National Guard was finally able to stop the riot. Out of the 12 COs that they took hostage, none of them was killed, but 7 of them were brutally beaten. Like I said, 33 inmates were killed, slaughtered. Some of the men from the National Guard described it as rivers of blood when they entered the penitentiary. All the blood from the slaughter, plus the flooding from all the water, made the water look like blood while it was going down the hallways. They said that later on when they got home and took their shoes off, their socks were pink from all the blood. So that's why this place is haunted. The Penitentiary of New Mexico's old main facility. It's been closed down since 1998, and they mostly use it as a film set now. They filmed a lot of good movies there, including The Book of Eli, The Longest Yard, Shot Caller, Lockdown, Fallon, Doing Time, The Lost Room, The Astronaut Farmer, and All the Pretty Horses. Anyway, since it's October and we're keeping up with the theme of Halloween, I just wanted to tell you guys another haunted story in New Mexico. So I hope you guys learned something new. This is Trajity. So today we're talking about witchcraft in New Mexico. So since it's October, the month of Halloween, this month I've been doing videos about haunted places and ghost stories in New Mexico. I've been kind of going into the occult. While this week I did a special study about witchcraft in New Mexico just for you guys. This is what I found out. First of all, witchcraft is a magical worldview sought to explain and control the universe by using religion, superstition, some elements of science, and psychology. And these systems often overlapped. Now this definition for witchcraft, I want to let you guys know I got from the state historian Robert Martinez, and I think his definition describes it best. Okay, let me explain a little bit of history so I could put this in context for you. So in Spain, the land of Spain, their ancestors were the Iberians. So Spain used to be Iberia, and Iberian people had their own beliefs. Then the Romans brought their beliefs and their gods to Spain when they conquered Spain. And in the 400s, the Visigoths, who conquered the Romans, brought their beliefs. So all their ideas and religions kind of blended together. Then in the 700s, the Moors came to Spain. These were people from northern Africa and they were Muslims. So now they brought the Muslim religion into Spain. So all these different ideas and religious practices all came together. They also had the ideas from the Eastern Mediterraneans. The Arabs wrote books such as Arts and Sciences, divination. They had books of the occult circulating throughout Spain written by Arab authors. They also had books of astrology written by Arab authors. So witchcraft is a composite phenomenon. Composite phenomenon just means it's made up from several different elements. So witchcraft is a composite phenomenon drawing from folklore, sorcery, demonology, heresy, and Christian theology. When the Roman Catholic Church came into power, they pretty much ruled the world. And any pre-Christian religions and their practices pretty much became defined as witchcraft. Okay, so the Roman Catholic Church was in power at the time. So when the Spaniards came, they were under the Roman Catholic religion. So when they came and colonized and conquered New Mexico, the Native Americans' religions and their religious practices were believed to be witchcraft, if that makes sense. Anything that wasn't Catholic was considered witchcraft, because at the heart of witchcraft is a pact with the devil. Then came the Spanish Inquisition. So in Spain, Queen Isabel started kicking out anybody that wasn't Catholic. They were persecuting the Jews and the Muslims, and they weren't letting them be allowed in Spain anymore. While the same thing was happening over here in New Mexico, anybody non-Catholic was getting persecuted. Witchcraft was considered heresy, and anything apart from the Catholic Church was considered witchcraft. Heresy is religious expression outside of church teaching. For example, blasphemy, or renouncing Christ, or desecrating any kind of religious object. Well, Catholic object anyway. The Spaniards came to New Mexico. Not only did they bring all the beliefs of Spain, but they also brought the beliefs of Mesoamerica, since they came from Mexico. They also brought Catholic Church law. Well, all of these blended with the Native American beliefs that were in the place already. So now New Mexico is just a melting pot of spiritual beliefs based on different kinds of folklores and legends. You had curanderas, which were healers. They would use herbs, spells, and they would heal people. People who had sicknesses would come to them and they would heal them. People who had a spell put on them would come to them and they would reverse the spell. Now, curanderas are real, trust me. I visited them a few times myself, but I just don't want to talk about that because it's family business. Anyway, even though curanderas were there to help people, to cure people, which is where the name is derived from, they were also considered witches, and they were persecuted and executed for being witches. There was also a lot of reports of wet nurses being accused as witches if the baby that they were taking care of happened to die while they were taking care of them. So there's a few documented incidents of witchcraft in New Mexico from the 1600s all the way till now. I'm going to read a few from the early days though, so check it out. There was a friar named Fray Alonso de Benavides, and he arrived in New Mexico in 1625. He was the head of the Franciscan Church and therefore the first agent of the Inquisition in New Mexico, so this guy wasn't bringing no love. He took many reports of witchcraft, sorcery, love spells, and magic from the citizens of New Mexico. Often the women were the ones being accused, or the Native Americans, or the mulattoes, the mestizos. See the trend I'm getting at here? In 1607, a Mexican Native American woman named Maria de Zamora was reported for witchcraft in the town of San Gabriel. So in 1607, this was before Santa Fe was even founded, there was San Juan, where Oñate was headquartered. They had a sister city on the other side of the river called San Gabriel. So this is where that happened at. So when she was brought before the court, she denied it, saying she was just doing things that she learned from Mexico. And then she got sentenced to excommunication. She wasn't allowed to enter San Gabriel anymore, and she was also not allowed to leave New Mexico so they could keep an eye on her. Then in 1626, 2 Native American women were denounced before Fray Alonso de Benavides for practicing witchcraft and sorcery. Beatriz de Los Angeles, who was said to be talented and intelligent, and her daughter Juana de la Cruz, who was a mestizo, her father a Spaniard named Juan de la Cruz. So they were accused of witchcraft in 1626, and then 5 years later, in 1631, they reopened the case. It was said that Beatriz practiced her black magic on 2 natives and killed them. She was also accused of putting a spell on her husband after she got in a fight with him. She put something in his atole and poisoned him. He died, but not before telling the people what she did, that she was a witch. An evil and murderous one at that. Her daughter Juana was accused of sorcery by a man who she had an affair with. After a fight with him, she gave him milk and cream, which killed him. She was even accused of the evil eye and making children fall ill. She even was accused of killing 1 child. It was believed that both women could travel vast distances in an egg. The friar that was in charge of this case didn't believe it. He believed that it was just superstition, so he dismissed the case, and they were never brought to trial. Then in 1629, a man named Luis de Rivera, a native of Sevilla, Spain, and settler of New Mexico, confessed to making a pact with the devil. He said a black slave taught him this demonology. The black slave was said to have a tattoo under his foot that signified reverence to the demon. It was said revering the devil made him successful in everything. This black slave also had a black book. The book had all kinds of drawings of demons, and if Louis signed it in his blood, the demon would never leave him and it would make him prosper in life. He also learned how to use herbs and spells from the Native American women that was able to let him control the desires of women, love spells. So this case came before the Inquisitor in 1630. Rivera denied it, saying that he prayed the Holy Mary and went to church every day, but they convicted him of heretic blasphemy, which is both heresy and blasphemy. Heresy because of the love spells using the herbs, and blasphemy because he signed his name in blood in that book. Then in 1751, a Spanish widow from Sandia named Barbara Garcia was accused of witchcraft. She was said to have an affair with a married man, and using his hair, she put a love spell on him. Then you had the Abiquiu witch trials in the 1760s, which pretty much marked the end to the witchcraft days. Fray Juan José de Toledo, who was the one that handled the Abiquiu witch trials, wrote this. Check out what he said. He said, "In the year 1764, some women possessed by the devil broke loose in this kingdom." I'll tell about the Abiquiu witch trials on another video because it's a long story and too detailed to tell. But in all, 12 people were accused of witchcraft and 5 young women had serious exorcisms done to them. Anyway, I just wanted to kind of give you a history of the origin of witchcraft in New Mexico. In the 1800s, the Inquisition was more considered with literature and Enlightenment books that were coming to Spain. They didn't care more about the witchcraft anymore. They were trying to keep that stuff out. They were trying to keep the books and stuff out. They were burning books and they were trying to keep anything that wasn't Catholic out of Spain. In 1821, the Mexican government took control of New Mexico. Then with the U.S. occupation, witchcraft was put more into the category of folklore and legend. And that's where they mostly remain today. I hope you learned something new. This is Trajity. So today, I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about beheading in New Mexico. So in Spanish colonial New Mexico, beheading was the most common form of execution. So if you were charged and found guilty of a crime that was punishable by death, and the execution was beheading, they would drag you onto the plaza, they would behead you, then they would put your head on a spike like on top of where the governor's palace is, so that way they could display it as a warning to anybody else. That's just the way things were back then. I'm going to give you a couple examples of some beheadings that took place in New Mexico. So in 1598, when Oñate came and settled in San Juan, New Mexico, a lot of his people didn't want to be there. They wanted to come at first, but they had high expectations. So when they got here, their expectations weren't met. So some of them would desert Oñate and flee south. But desertion is punishable by death, so those who deserted would be executed by beheading. So there's this story about these 5 men who deserted from Oñate and fled south. This had to have been anywhere between 1598 and 1607. Oñate sent his captain, who was named Gaspar Villagra, to capture them and execute them. He caught up with them and he did execute all 5 of them by chopping their heads off. But then after he did that, hypocritically, he fled south and deserted Oñate himself. Now I don't know if he ever got caught for this and executed, but that's just the story. So another interesting beheading that took place in New Mexico history happened in 1641. Governor Luis de Rosas was assassinated, and the men who assassinated him were dragged onto the plaza and beheaded one by one. So basically they assassinated the governor for not being Catholic. While he was in office, they said that he was a Lutheran and a Calvinist and that he was telling the people of Santa Fe to reject Jesus. Now I don't know if this is true or not, but that's what they said he did, and that's why they assassinated him. While they took him to trial, and he was found not guilty of these charges. And then in 1641, he left office. And after that, there was a city councilman named Antonio Baca who took it into his own hands to bring Rosas back under trial, convict him as guilty, and lock him up in a cell while it was the residence under guard. So it's pretty much a cell. He did this illegally, by the way, against the government. That's why he waited till he was out of office until he did it. One night, a group of men broke into the residence that he was held prisoner at, and they stabbed him with a sword. So they say it was about 6 men who did this, and so all these men were dragged onto the plaza and beheaded one by one. And this was done by the new governor, whose name was Alonso Pacheco, and he had council member Antonio Baca arrested for what he did. They dragged him onto the plaza and they beheaded him as well. But even further, they got his head and they nailed it to a post. And this was as a warning to warn anybody that would try to oppose him while he was governor. Anyway, Then in 1837, there was another governor who had his head chopped off during the Taos Rebellion. So in 1821, Mexico took control of New Mexico. And when they did, they started taxing the New Mexicans excessively. So the people of northern New Mexico offered their protection. Since they were all the way in the north, they offered protection from anybody who would try to invade New Spain from the north. And in exchange for this protection, Spain exempted them from paying taxes. So they never had to pay taxes. So when the Mexican government took control in 1821 and was making them pay all these taxes, pushing all these taxes, people were getting mad. Now the first governor of New Mexico under the Mexican rule was Albino Perez. So he was the one enforcing Mexican taxes. So the people didn't like him. The people of New Mexico already disliked him. They hated him. And the people of Taos Pueblo, who hadn't paid taxes in all these years, hated him the most. So the deal that they had with Spain was only going to last until 1837. And now that Mexico took control of New Mexico, it wasn't going to be renewed. The Mexican government was overtaxing everybody. They were taking a third of everything, and they were taxing them for everything you could think of. So the Taos people rose up in rebellion. So Governor Albino Perez gathered 200 men and rode north to stop the rebellion. And remember, I told you most of New Mexico didn't like Governor Albino Perez. So he ran into the opposition about 20 miles north of Santa Fe in San Ildefonso Pueblo. And when he ran into them, most of the 200 men he had went to the other side. So him and his remaining men fled south. But some Native Americans from Santo Domingo Pueblo caught him right on the outskirts of Santa Fe, and they chopped his head off. It's said that they played sports with it by kicking it around like a soccer ball. They also killed about 20 more government officials. Then they proclaimed one of their own, Jose Gonzalez of Taos, the governor of New Mexico. Of course, this was considered treason, and in 1838, a former governor named Manuel Armijo retook control and put down the rebellion. Then he arrested and executed this Jose Gonzalez of Taos Pueblo by chopping off his head and displaying it in Santa Fe for everybody to see. And he did that as a warning for anybody else that was even thinking about rebelling. Anyway, so that was my little presentation on beheading in New Mexico. I hope you learned something new. Thank you for watching. This is Tragedy. So today I'm going to tell you guys about Halloween. What is Halloween? How does it start? What does it mean? Let me tell you. So if you want to find the origin of Halloween, you're going to have to go all the way back to the Iron Age and to the ancient Celtic people. So the ancient Celts came from Iceland, Scotland, the UK, and parts of Europe. Anyway, so they had a 3-day festival called Samhain on October 31st, and that's the origin of Halloween. So they had 4 festivals every year, one to celebrate each season change, but Samhain was the most important. Samhain means summer's end in Old Irish. And Samhain was to celebrate the end of harvest. They would also celebrate the dead, because on Samhain, not only was it the end of harvest, but it was also their new year. So they had a calendar, and the calendar was cut into 2 halves, the light half and the dark half. So on Samhain, October 31st, that was when the light half transitioned into the dark half of the year. So the light half of the year gave way to the dark half of the year, and on October 31st was like the in-between, if that makes sense. So on this day, they believed that the veil that separated the living and the dead was at its thinnest. Some even say that the veil was lifted on this day. So they believed that the spirits of the dead would walk the earth on this day. So on October 31st, at dusk in the evening, once all the campfires were extinguished, the Druids, who were the Celtic priests, would light a big bonfire in the middle of the camp. They would sacrifice animals and throw their bones into the bonfire, which is actually where the word bonfire originated. Bone fire. They would throw the bones into the fire, so it was a bonfire, a bonfire. And since it was the end of harvest festival, not only would they sacrifice animals, but they would sacrifice some of the crops that they harvested. Now they would do this as an offering to the dead spirits that were to be walking the earth on that day. They would also have a big feast, and they would even set the dead people spots on the table for them to eat with them. Some of the Celtic people also wore costumes made of animal skins, so that way they could try to fool the evil spirits that might be there to cause trouble into thinking they're animals instead of humans, so they wouldn't fuck with them. And this was the origin of costume wearing. Some people would also play pranks or tricks on the town. They would vandalize the town and they would do shit, and then they would blame the evil spirits. And that's where the trick from the trick or treat came from. Then Rome conquered the Celts in 43 CE. So Roman Catholicism forced the Celtic pagan religions and traditions to evolve by implementing them into Catholicism. It was easier to convert Celtic people into Christianity by implementing some of the pagan celebrations into the Catholic calendar. So they turned Samhain into All Souls Day or All Hallows Day. So all of the Samhain symbols, festivals, temples, and legends were Christianized. See, All Saints Day was a Catholic holiday that celebrated all the saints, and it was held on May 13th. But when they did this and implemented the pagan beliefs and religions into their calendar, they moved All Saints Day to November 1st. So All Hallows Day is on November 1st. And they implemented as many of Samhain's traditions and customs into All Saints Day that they could. And then on November 2nd, they started a new holiday called All Souls Day, which implemented all the other customs and beliefs that they couldn't get into All Saints Day into All Souls Day, if that makes sense. So November 2nd became All Souls Day, and it was made to absorb all the other elements of Samhain that All Saints Day wasn't able to absorb. See, bonfires were still lit, but now they were lit for Christian heroes. So the ancient Celtic people used Samhain to celebrate their dead, and now it was used to celebrate the saints and the Christian martyrs. And instead of making animal sacrifices on the day of Samhain, instead they sent people to give offerings to the poor. Tricks and pranks continued, but instead of being blamed on the dead spirits that were walking the earth on Samhain, now they are blamed on the saints. So pretty much they made it boring, but don't worry, because when the Irish immigrants came in the 19th century, the 1800s, they bring it back. So before that, in America's early days of colonization, the Puritans who settled the 13 colonies, they were Puritans, which are Christians, Protestant, pretty much. They're against the Catholic Church. That's the reason that they even fled and came this way to settle America, is because they were running from the Catholics. They were fleeing persecution. They were refugees. But since they were against the Catholic Church, celebrating All Saints Day and Halloween was banned. It was forbidden because it was considered too pagan for the colonizers. Then in the 1800s, due to the potato famine in Ireland, a lot of Irish immigrants started fleeing to America, refugees. This is where Billy the Kid's parents came from, by the way. Anyway, they came back and they bring the old Irish traditions of Halloween with them, such as the jack-o'-lantern. So the legend of the jack-o'-lantern goes, there was a guy named Stingy Jack, and he was both an excessive drunk and a brilliant con man. Well, he was so sick of a con man that he conned the devil into banning him from hell. So he thought he was smart, so that way he couldn't go to hell when he died, he could just go to heaven. But he forgot that he was such an excessive sinner that when he died, he was banned from heaven too. So now, he couldn't go to heaven or hell, and he was forced to be stuck in the middle. So he was cursed to stay in between heaven and hell, constantly wandering. He had a turnip that was carved, and it had an ember of hell in it, and he used that to light his way. And on All Hallows Eve, the Irish would carve turnips and put a candle in them and put them outside their house to protect themselves from Stingy Jack. And that's where the jack-o'-lantern came from. But when they came to the USA, they changed it to pumpkins because pumpkins were easier to carve. The Irish changed Halloween up a little bit. They made it better again. In keeping with the tradition of mischief, the kids would dress in costumes and run around playing tricks and pranks on people. They would also be given treats, such as money or fruit, for offering artistic talent, such as reciting poetry, singing a song, telling a joke, etc. I forgot to mention, in the 16th century, the Christians had this thing called souling. Now, this was the act of knocking on doors and asking for soul cakes in return for prayers. I don't even know what that means, but that's what it was. And they did this on All Hallows Evening, or All Hallows Eve, which later became Halloween. But the Irish turned it into dressing in costumes, running around and tricking people, pranking people, and offering artistic talent for rewards. So there's your tricks, there's your treats, there's where you get your jack-o'-lantern, the ghosts from when the veil was thinnest and they thought the spirits were walking the earth, so that's where the ghosts came into Halloween. There was also a certain incident that happened in England on November 5th, 1605. There was this dude named Guy Fawkes, and he was a Catholic, and he had some Catholic supporters with him, and there was a plot that they had to kill the Protestant King James I and all his parliament, and they're gonna blow him up with gunpowder. They failed, and this is known as the Gunpowder Plot. They actually made a mini-series on HBO called Gunpowder featuring Kit Harington, the guy that played Jon Snow. It's actually a good little series. It'll tell you what happened with that event. Well, like I said, it failed and Guy Fawkes was executed. So Christians in England started celebrating Guy Fawkes Day every November 5th. This was to celebrate their triumph over Catholicism in England. They would light bonfires and hang effigies of the Pope and other enemy figures. Then they would have their children put a Guy Fawkes effigy in a wheelbarrow and roll him around, going door to door begging for treats and money. And this was to shame Guy Fawkes, like to make him look like he was just a bum. So this was called Bonfire Night, and it's still celebrated in England today, while some of the elements of Bonfire Night were also incorporated into Halloween. So the person who gets the credit for making Halloween what it really is today would be a woman named Elizabeth Krebs. Now on the night of Halloween, kids would vandalize the town. They would mess it up. Now this lady was trying to stop that, so she threw a big old party one year so she could get all the kids there, but it didn't work. That was in 1912. Then in 1913 she did it again, and all the kids went, and it was a success. They had a band, they had a parade, they wore costumes, and they had costume contests. And in the end, the town wasn't vandalized. Well, when this was a success, the rest of America followed, and modern Halloween was born. And so that's how Halloween came to be what it is today. Well, I hope you learned something new. This is Tragedy. Thank you for watching. I'm out.